Hi, I'm Aveline. And if you're listening, then maybe you've been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, too. My mother broke into my home, stole my daughter's college savings, then told her she'd let her starve if she said a word. When I found out, she didn't deny it. She slapped my child and called her a bastard. And my father? He just looked at me and said, "It's only kid money. Don't make a scene." That moment broke something in me, but not in the way they expected. They thought I'd stay silent. They had no idea what I was about to do next. Before we begin, tell me, what time are you listening to this? Where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. Let's go through this together. The sun was just dipping behind the hills when I pulled into the driveway. The sky wore that honey-colored haze only October evenings in California could offer. I remember thinking, just for a second, how peaceful it looked. But the peace didn't follow me to the porch. My front door was open, not wide, just barely ajar. The kind of open that says someone was here who shouldn't have been. The lock was busted, wood splintered near the knob, and the metal plate was bent inward. My chest tightened. I didn't move for a good 5 seconds, just stood there with my keys clenched in my hand, breath caught in my throat. I pushed the door open, slow. My eyes scanned the living room. Nothing was smashed, but everything felt off. The curtains swayed though the windows were closed. The coffee table drawers were half open. A framed photo of Luke, my late husband, had been knocked face down. And then I saw her, Etta. My daughter was curled up on the couch, her knees drawn to her chest. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were red and puffy, like the tears had already dried. Her piggy bank, that silly purple box shaped like a kitten, was open beside her, empty. "Etta!" I crossed the room, kneeling in front of her. "Sweetheart, what happened?" She looked at me. I could tell she was trying to be brave. That's what broke me. That tiny, determined face trying to hold in a storm. She clutched the empty box like it could still protect her. "Grandma came," she whispered. I blinked. "What?" "She said she needed the money, that it was important. She didn't even knock." I felt my throat go dry. "And the door?" "She used a key, I think. Then, she broke it when she left. I don't know. She was angry." I sat back on my heels. This didn't make sense. My mother had a key, sure, but we hadn't spoken in weeks, not really. Not since the last argument about how I raised my daughter like a little princess with no backbone. "She said if I told you," Etta's voice dropped to a whisper, "she wouldn't feed me next time I visited. She said I'd go to bed hungry." I froze. I could feel the fury bloom inside my chest, hot and choking. Not just because she took the money, but because she used hunger as a weapon against a 10-year-old girl. My girl. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat there, hand on Etta's knee, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "How much did she take?" "All of it," she said, not even flinching. 26,000. I counted last week." I had to look away. That money, birthday gifts, lemonade stands, babysitting neighbors' dogs, everything Etta had saved for 6 years, and my mother just took it. I stood up and walked to the cabinet, yanked open the drawer where we kept the backup flash drive for the security system. Empty. I checked the monitor. Dead. My heart sank. Then I went outside. The cord connecting the camera to the power box had been sliced clean. She didn't just break in, she planned it. I came back inside, calmer now, but only on the outside. Etta sat upright, watching me. "She scared me, Mom." I sat beside her and wrapped my arms around her small frame. "She's never going to scare you again," I said quietly. "No one will." And in that moment, something in me shifted. All these years, I let things slide. My mother had a talent for hurting in ways no one could see. A smirk in front of guests, A private insult with a sweet smile. And I'd let it slide, again and again, because that's what I was taught. Don't make a scene. But this was no longer about keeping the peace. This was about protecting my daughter from a woman who saw kindness as weakness and boundaries as a challenge. The lock wasn't the only thing she broke today. She crossed a line she can't uncross. And for the first time, I wasn't going to stay quiet about it. She didn't just take the money, she took something she can't ever give back. Etta fell asleep before we even left our street. I kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, the way her small frame slumped to the side, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, the one with one eye missing. I didn't have the heart to wake her when I pulled into my parents' driveway. The porch lights were on, casting a soft glow on the manicured hedges and perfectly swept walkway. Everything looked normal, which somehow made it worse. I left the engine running, cracked the windows, and locked the doors behind me. The broken lock was in my hand, wrapped in a dish towel. I wasn't entirely sure why I brought it. Maybe I needed something physical to hold on to. Something to remind myself I wasn't crazy. Their front door opened before I could knock. My father stood there, wearing the same beige cardigan I remembered from childhood. TV voices drifted behind him. Some crime show rerun. His expression didn't change when he saw me. Aveline, couldn't this wait until morning? I stepped forward, brushing past him. No, it couldn't. He sighed, shut the door behind me, then followed with those soft indoor slippers that made him sound like a ghost walking on carpet. Claudine sat at the kitchen table, tea in one hand, pearls resting just so around her neck. Her posture straight, her expression unreadable. You'd think she was waiting to discuss a minor social disagreement, not a break-in. She didn't look up right away, just took a sip and set the cup down delicately. Must be important, she said, finally meeting my eyes. You broke into my house. Her brow lifted, just slightly. Your house? Let's not pretend you built it with your own hands. My grip on the dish towel tightened. You took Etta's savings. $26,000. You threatened her. My mother gave a long, practiced sigh, the kind designed to make everyone in the room feel tired of me. She looked at my father. Do you hear the way she speaks to me? He didn't meet my eyes. He just muttered, It's just kid money, Aveline. Don't make a scene. There it was, that phrase. 3 words I'd heard my entire life. After every insult, every lie, every slap disguised as discipline. My mother used it like a commandment. And my father? He lived by it. Don't make a scene, I repeated, quieter now. I looked at him. Really looked. His gray hair was thinner than I remembered. His shoulders a little more hunched. But the silence, that stayed the same. The silence that watched every wrongdoing and called it peace. I gave that girl everything, Claudine continued, brushing an invisible crumb from the table. While you were off playing house with that man, I was the one who held this family together. She's 10, I said, keeping my voice even. You threatened to starve her. She smiled. Oh, come now. You know how dramatic children can be. I placed the wrapped lock on the table. The zout sound it made, solid, final, broke the air like a slap. This was the lock you destroyed to get in. Claudine stared at it, her smile thinning just slightly. You think you can come in here and accuse me like some stranger off the street? I think, I said carefully, that you wanted to remind me you still could. There was a long pause. My father shifted, clearly uncomfortable, but he didn't say a word. Claudine leaned forward, elbows gently resting on the polished wood. Her voice lowered, almost tender. If you go around telling people this story, Aveline, all you'll do is embarrass yourself. Families forgive, outsiders don't. I blinked. That wasn't a defense. That was a threat wearing the mask of love. "You're not scared of what you did," I said. "You're scared of losing control of the story." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Then she leaned back, gathering her tea again like we were back to normal. "Well, it's late." "This isn't about forgiveness anymore," I said. She didn't respond. Just looked at me, calm, steady, polished. But I saw it now. Underneath the routine, the posture, the carefully controlled world, there was fear. She wasn't used to being challenged, and certainly not by me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I stood there, letting the silence sit like a weight in the room. When she smiled again, I realized the scariest monsters don't hide under beds. They sit at the table and call it dinner. Driving home, I replayed my mother's words over and over, like a bad song stuck in my head. The road blurred. I didn't turn the radio on, didn't speak. Just drove, hands tight on the wheel, Etta breathing softly in the back seat, still asleep, unaware of how deep this ran. 2 nights passed before I touched the box. I'd put it off, told myself I was too tired, or that I should be focusing on work, or just spending time with Etta. But really, I was avoiding what I already knew. That this thing between my mother and me wasn't new. That what happened with the money, with Etta, it wasn't a crack. It was a pattern. One that had started long before my daughter was even born. That Thursday night, after Etta was tucked into bed and I double-checked that the windows were locked, I stood in the living room for a long while, looking at the worn cardboard box on the bookshelf. I'd taken it with me the day I moved out, even though my mother told me to leave it. "None of that matters anymore," she'd said. "Let the past go." I carried it to the coffee table, sat cross-legged on the carpet, and lifted the lid. Old photos were on top. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, school awards. All moments I remembered but somehow felt removed from, like I was looking at someone else's life. Then I saw it. A yellowed bank statement, dated April 2004. I was 18 then, senior year. My grandmother had passed away that winter. I remember her funeral. The quietness of it, the way my mother didn't shed a tear. I unfolded the paper. There was my name on the account, Aveline Marin Trust. And then the line that hit like a punch to the stomach. Final withdrawal, $25,000. Claudine Marin. I blinked, read it again. I never saw a dime of that money. I remembered getting accepted into college. How excited I was. How I'd applied for grants and financial aid on my own because my mother didn't have time for forms. When the aid didn't come through, she told me, "You need to learn responsibility, Aveline. Not everything gets handed to you." So I picked up shifts at the diner during the week and cleaned offices on weekends just to cover tuition. I thought I was earning my independence. Turns out, I was just being punished. I sat back against the couch, letting the paper fall to my lap. My throat was tight, but the tears didn't come. Not yet. Underneath the bank statement were envelopes, 5 of them, all sealed, addressed to me, postmarked from 21 years ago. My grandmother's handwriting. I opened the top one. "Sweetheart, if your mother gives you this, it means I'm gone. I left a little something to help you start your life, your own life. Don't let anyone make you small. You are not your mother. You are better. Love you always, Grandma Edith." The rest of the letters were just like that. Notes of encouragement, small jokes, bits of advice. But I'd never seen them. Not one. She never gave them to me. My mother hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen the memory of someone who loved me right. I pushed the letters aside and kept digging through the box until I found it. A folded Home Depot receipt. I wouldn't have paid it much attention if the handwriting on the back hadn't caught my eye. It was my mother's signature. The date matched the final withdrawal on the bank statement. The items purchased: cabinets, paint, granite countertops. My grandmother's money didn't go to me, it went into their kitchen. And then, like something crawling out from the dark, my eyes landed on the total. $25,000. The exact same amount she had taken from Etta. No variation, not even a penny off. I felt something crack open in me. A bone-deep kind of anger. Not the shouting kind, but the cold, clean kind. The kind that lets you see everything clearly for the first time. This wasn't about cash. This was about control, humiliation, making sure I always felt like I owed her something. I stood and walked over to the window, looking out into the quiet street. My reflection stared back. Older, tired, but steady. My mother hadn't just taken my trust fund. She'd taken my choices, my future. And now, she was trying to do the same to Etta. But Etta would never know this pain. I went back to the couch, gathered the letters, the bank statement, the receipt, and laid them out side by side like evidence. Because that's what they were now. Not memories, proof. Proof that my mother had stolen from 2 generations. And gotten away with it, until now. I whispered to no one but myself. It ends with me. I called Meredith just after sunrise. She was a lawyer I'd known since law school. Sharp, steady, not one to entertain drama, which made her the exact person I needed. I didn't tell her everything, just the facts, just enough. Can inheritance fraud be proven if the money was taken years ago? I asked, standing barefoot in the kitchen, coffee growing cold on the counter. There was a pause, then her voice, flat but focused. Depends on the paper trail, and whether the intent to conceal or deceive can be shown. Why? I told her I'd explain later, that I wasn't ready to file anything yet. Not officially, but I wanted to understand the path. I needed to know if there was one. After I hung up, I went back to the box and stared at the documents again. Each item, each letter, laid out like stepping stones to the truth. I wasn't just confronting my mother anymore. I was stepping into something deeper, a reckoning that had been a long time coming. By early afternoon, I'd dressed in my most neutral clothes. Clean lines, soft colors, no emotion. Something about the act of getting ready made me feel like I was preparing for court. Only this time there'd be no judge. Just the woman who'd taught me to fear confrontation, and the part of me that had finally stopped obeying. The drive to Pasadena was drenched in sunlight, the kind that feels too cheerful for the kind of thoughts running through your head. I didn't turn on the radio this time either. I just practiced the words out loud, calm, direct, unfaltering. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I could already feel the old ache forming in my chest. That house, pristine on the outside, with its rose bushes and fresh paint, always looked like stability to others. But to me, it had always felt like a stage set for a play where I was only allowed to read the lines she wrote for me. Claudine answered the door with her signature smile, the one she wore like jewelry. "I didn't expect you to come back so soon," she said, stepping aside. I didn't return the smile. I stepped into the kitchen, pulled out the copies I'd made, and laid them gently on the table between us. "You took what wasn't yours. From me. From Etta." She glanced at the papers, then looked back up with a practiced sigh. "You always were dramatic." "I'm not here for a performance," I replied. "I'm here because this ends now." She lowered herself into the chair, tea already steeping beside her, as if she'd been expecting a guest or a fight. "You'd humiliate your own family over a misunderstanding?" Her tone was syrupy, condescending. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "You stole my inheritance. You stole my daughter's money. You intercepted letters from Grandma that were meant for me. That's not something I'm imagining. I have proof." The shift was small. Her fingers paused mid-stir, but I noticed. "If you don't make this right, I'll make sure." "Everyone knows," I continued, voice even. Her laugh was soft, bitter. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't drag your family name through the mud." "You already did that for us," I said. From the hallway, I heard footsteps. My father emerged, rubbing his forehead as if he already regretted walking in. "Can we all just take a breath?" he said. "Aveline, let's talk about this like adults." I turned to him, the words catching in my throat, but only for a moment. "Then act like one." He looked wounded, but not surprised. "You stood by and watched this happen. You always stood by. When she belittled me, when she lied, you let her teach me that silence was the same as love." Claudine set her cup down a little harder than necessary. "You're making a mistake." I ignored her. Instead, I reached into my bag and slid a small digital recorder onto the table. "You can deny it to my face, but you won't deny what you said on record." The moment was microscopic, but it happened. Her mouth opened slightly, her eyes blinking fast. The mask slipped just enough. "You'll regret this," she said, barely more than a whisper. I picked up the papers, the recorder, and turned to leave. "Not as much as you will." As I stepped outside, the sun hit my face. The light didn't feel so cheerful now. It felt clear, sharp. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the woman behind that door. I was closing up for the day when I saw it sitting on my desk. No stamp, no postmark, just my name, carefully written in her unmistakable script. The A had that little loop at the top she insisted was the only proper way to begin a name. My stomach turned before I even picked it up. I scanned the office, half expecting someone to step out from the shadows. The cleaning crew wasn't due for another hour. The front door had been locked. But someone had been here. My fingers hovered over the flap. I should have thrown it out. I should have walked it straight to the shredder. Instead, I opened it like a reflex, like a daughter still doing what her mother expected. Inside was a single photograph, one I hadn't seen in years. All of us, posed in front of the Christmas tree. Claudine wearing her pearls, Miles with his smug little smirk. Dad somewhere in the middle, as always. And me, eyes hollow, arms crossed, not quite smiling. Just there. Tucked behind it was a short, handwritten note. "You've always been the problem, Aveline. You and your father's weakness." I didn't breathe. I just sat down. She hadn't even tried to mask the malice. No pretense, no manipulation softened by charm. Just a blow to the chest, neat and direct. She wasn't warning me. She was declaring war. Then I saw the other paper. Folded into quarters was a printed letter, addressed to the board of my law firm, not sent, not sealed, but ready. It accused me of using company time and resources to pursue personal vendettas, implying I'd violated ethics clauses in my contract. It was vicious, detailed, almost believable if you didn't know the truth. And it was from her. I could hear her voice in the silence. "You always push too far, Aveline. You think the world's supposed to bend for your feelings." The nausea came in waves. I stood, paced, sat again. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From fury I didn't yet know where to place. And then something clicked. She hadn't mailed it. She'd delivered it. That meant someone helped her. Someone she trusted not to ask questions. I moved quickly, turning on the office's security feed. There were only 2 cameras, one in the lobby, one pointed at the back door. The footage wasn't long, just a figure in a beige coat, slipping something through the mail slot. I leaned in. It was Miles. I closed the laptop slowly, then sat back, letting the betrayal settle like a lead weight in my chest. Of course it was him. Of course she sent him. He'd always been her errand boy, her mouthpiece, the one she called when she needed something done without getting her hands dirty. An hour later, he called. His name flashed on my phone like a dare. "Hey," he started, voice way too light. "Mom said you're blowing this way out of proportion." I didn't waste time. You delivered it." There was a pause, but not denial, not even surprise. "I was just—" "No," I cut him off. "You knew what was in it. You knew exactly what she was doing." He sighed, the kind of exasperated sound he used to make when I cried too loudly as a kid. "You make everything a battle, and you make everything a lie." He didn't respond, just hung up. That silence rang louder than any shouting match we'd ever had. By the time I got home, the house felt colder than usual. Etta was at a sleepover. I didn't turn on any lights. I just stood in the kitchen, the envelope still in my hand. I didn't cry, not at first. I sat down on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, and stared at the hardwood. I felt nothing, no rage, no shock, just the strange, echoing silence of knowing no one was coming to save me. Not a father, not a brother, not even the idea of a mother I used to imagine might show up one day and say, "I'm sorry." I almost tore the papers in half. Almost. Instead, I reached for a folder and tucked them inside, carefully, deliberately, like evidence being prepared for court. Because that's what it was now. This wasn't about feelings. It wasn't about making her understand. It was about documenting what she'd done. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win her love. I was trying to prove her damage. I sat there for another 20 minutes before I stood up. My spine hurt, my chest ached. But my mind was sharp. I poured a glass of water, held it steady in both hands, and whispered to the dark kitchen, "I used to think my mother couldn't hurt me anymore. I was wrong. She just changed the weapons." The next morning, I didn't head into the office. I didn't even change out of my jeans. I poured a travel mug of coffee, tucked the envelope into my bag, and drove straight to the Los Angeles County Courthouse. It was still early, the parking lot mostly empty, sunlight crawling across the sidewalk like it wasn't about to uncover decades of theft. I knew what I was looking for. I just didn't know how deep it would go. Inside, the records division was quiet, the kind of sterile quiet that feels like a held breath. I approached the counter and asked to see all financial and property filings under my parents' names, Lowell and Claudine Marin, dating back 25 years. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "That's going to be a lot." "I've got time," I said, setting my ID on the counter. He disappeared into the back, and I sat in one of the plastic chairs, watching the second hand circle the courthouse clock. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The clerk finally returned, wheeling out 2 boxes and a stack of folders tall enough to hide behind. He slid over a clipboard. "You'll need to review these here. No originals leave the premises." "Fair enough." I rolled up my sleeves. What started as a search felt more like an excavation. Page after page, I found old property assessments, loan filings, even donation receipts. But then, midway through the 3rd folder, I spotted it. A document labeled "Gift of Funds to Dependent Minor," amount $26,000, date 12 years ago, recipient Claudine Marin, source the Sylvia Marin Trust, purpose renovation, non-specified. I stared at the paper until the lines blurred. It wasn't just a transfer, it was a pattern. My mother hadn't stumbled into stealing from me and Etta. She'd been grooming that behavior like a legacy. And the date? It matched perfectly with the year Etta's college account had been opened. Claudine hadn't just taken from me, she'd practiced. Twice the same amount, twice the same betrayal. I flipped the page and found the notarized signature. My mother's, written with pride. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone and took photos. Every angle, every page. For the first time, I wasn't shaking with rage. I wasn't confused or begging for answers. I was collecting evidence. "If this is war," I muttered, "I'm finally armed." It was nearly 3 p.m. by the time I left the building. I didn't want to go home yet. not to the silence, not to the echo of that envelope. Instead, I stopped at a little diner on the way out of downtown, one I hadn't been to since law school. I sat in a booth by the window and ordered eggs, toast, and black coffee. The waitress didn't even look at me twice. I ate slowly, watching people pass on the sidewalk, their lives untouched by the storm I was living. And for the first time in days, I wasn't pacing or dreading or spinning in my own head. I just breathed. My reflection in the window looked older, but not in a bad way, wiser, sharper. Someone who'd been through fire and was still walking forward. When I got home, dusk was settling. The air was cool, and I left the front door open for a moment, letting it sweep through the house. I placed the courthouse papers on the kitchen table and began a fresh file, trust abuse evidence. But peace never lasts long around my mother. My phone buzzed, voicemail from my assistant. "Hey, Aveline, the managing partner asked me to tell you. The board's placed you on temporary leave, pending an ethics review. Something about misuse of firm resources. I'm so sorry. They're saying it'll be quick, but..." I didn't even listen to the rest. She'd moved faster than I thought. Her letter, or one just like it, had already reached them. I stood still for a full minute, letting the shock wash over me. It didn't sting like it would have before. I didn't feel helpless. I felt confirmed. This wasn't just about family, it was about control. I took a breath, pulled out my phone, and called Alina Hayes, my contact at the state bar. She picked up. "Aveline? If she wants to play legal," I said, calm and clear, "we'll play legal." I outlined what I had: documents, timing, intent, personal sabotage. Alina didn't interrupt once. "Send me everything," she said. "And Aveline, stay ahead of her." I hung up, poured a glass of water, and walked to the window. The street outside was dark, the porch lights glowing faintly like old memories. She thought she'd cornered me, but I wasn't trapped. I was evolving. She'd built her empire on silence. I was about to turn the volume all the way up. The morning was unusually still. No wind, no noise from the street outside. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. It felt like the kind of silence that only comes right before something shifts, before something cracks wide open. I parked in front of a modest beige home tucked into the edge of Pasadena's old district. Judge Evelyn Grant's house was nothing extravagant, white trim, hydrangeas framing the porch, but it had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter, like the woman inside. I took a moment before ringing the bell. My breath was steady, but I could feel the hum of nerves beneath my skin. This meeting could change everything. She answered the door herself. "Aveline," she said plainly, "I figured it was only a matter of time." Her hair was pulled back in a silver twist, and her voice hadn't softened with age. She didn't offer a handshake, just turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open for me to follow. We sat in her sunroom, light streaming through gauzy curtains. She poured tea, unsweetened, and set a plate of shortbread cookies between us that neither of us touched. "I remember your mother well," she said, not as a compliment. "Claudine always had a talent for bending rules, just enough not to break them, on paper." I opened the folder I'd brought, carefully sliding the documents across the table. Property transfers, the trust records, the forged consent letters with signatures Claudine had no right to sign. She picked each one up with slow, deliberate hands. "This," she said, tapping a date. "This was filed under my docket, but I never saw this version." I watched her jaw tighten as she kept reading. Her eyes didn't flicker, but something in her posture changed. She always wanted control over everything that wasn't hers, she muttered, almost to herself. By the time she reached the last page, she was already pulling a notepad toward her. "You'll need an affidavit," she said, "and I'll need copies of everything." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat had closed up around the lump that had been lodged there since I was 15. This wasn't sympathy. This was validation. "I'm not doing this for your mother," she added. "She gambled her name and she's about to lose." I nodded once, slow. "I just want the truth to weigh more than the performance." She looked up. "It always does, eventually." By the time I left her house, the fog inside me had lifted. The lies had been loud for so long, I almost forgot what truth sounded like. But that morning, it had a voice, a legal one. I spent the weekend prepping, documents in triplicate, timelines clear. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't need to. I wasn't running scared anymore. The hearing room at my firm wasn't large, but it was crowded. Senior partners, board members, the ethics committee, all seated with their pens ready and eyes curious. I walked in without flinching. Claudine's complaint painted me as emotionally unstable, vengeful, and distracted by personal vendettas. She had pulled old emails, spun gaps in my case schedules into imagined misconduct. It was thorough, it was vicious, and it was fiction. I laid out my side in facts. Here's the timeline. Here are the forged documents. Here's the trust language. Here's the notarized statement from Judge Evelyn Grant confirming procedural irregularities and misfiled authorizations. And here's the exact amount taken, twice, matching what was borrowed from my daughter. For a moment, no one spoke. Then someone in the back cleared their throat and whispered to the associate next to them, just loud enough for the words to travel. "Her mom's cooked." Within minutes, the suspension was lifted. No apology. But they knew. And more importantly, they knew I knew. Afterward, I walked out into the sun. The breeze felt different, lighter, less sharp. For the first time in what felt like months, I wasn't dragging weight behind me. I called Miles. He picked up. "Don't say anything," I said, before he could start with whatever line he'd rehearsed. "Just listen." There was a pause. "I'm not asking you to fight with me," I said, "but you don't have to drown with her either." Another silence, not cold, not angry, just quiet. He didn't hang up, and that was enough. I stood outside the building for a few more minutes, letting the warmth of the sun hit my shoulders. I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure, truth, airing out every lie that had been hidden under layers of status and silence. And Claudine? She built her kingdom on appearances, on keeping people quiet and keeping herself clean. But now the truth had paperwork. I didn't need to raise my voice to destroy her. The truth was loud enough. The house smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary. Etta was helping slice bread, her small hands steady, careful. I stirred the stew and glanced at the clock. Just past 7. The air felt heavy, though the windows were cracked open. A weight I couldn't name settled in the corners of the room. Then headlights swept across the front wall. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor pulling into the wrong driveway. But the beam stayed, idling. Then the engine cut. I walked to the window. My stomach turned. Claudine. She stepped out slowly. Rain had started, light at first, but enough to soak her blouse and plaster her hair to her cheeks. Her makeup was running, black streaks beneath her eyes like war paint, or maybe mascara turned confession. She held her purse tight, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Before I could move to the door, it burst open. "You humiliated me, Aveline." Her voice cracked in the middle of my name. "You've turned everyone against me." Etta froze mid-step. She backed up behind the kitchen island, instinctively reaching for her phone. I stepped forward, steady. "You weren't invited. You made me a villain. Do you know what people are saying? Do you know the calls I've gotten?" "I didn't make you anything," I said. "You just stopped hiding." You ungrateful brat, she hissed, dropping her purse to the floor. After everything I did, after everything I gave, this is how you repay me? She moved closer, her voice pitched high, words slurring from something deeper than anger. Panic, maybe, or fear finally catching up. I saw you at that hearing, she sneered, with your smug face, parading those old papers around like trophies. You think anyone believes you? She was shaking, and then the dam broke. I wrote the letter, she snapped. I forged it, and yes, I sent Miles. He owed me. Etta gasped. It was barely audible, but it sliced through the air. Claudine heard it too. Her eyes darted toward my daughter. You think this little performance changes anything? She shouted. You've always been a disappointment, just like your father. I should have felt something. Rage, shame, hurt. But instead, I felt calm, like the eye of a hurricane had settled into my chest. You're not going to hit me, I said quietly, seeing her hand rise again, like it had so many times before. Her palm came halfway up, and I caught her wrist mid-air. She froze. You don't get to do that anymore. She tried to pull back, but I didn't flinch. My voice stayed even. You lost that right the day I realized fear was your only language. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person holding her still. Maybe she didn't. Mom, Etta whispered from the corner. It's all there. I hit record. The camera's on. Claudine spun around. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I looked past her to the small security cam nestled above the entryway, red light blinking. Everything you said, I added. The confession, the threats, the trespass, all of it. Her shoulders collapsed inward. She stumbled a step back. You think the world will believe you over me? I don't need them to, I said. I've got the footage. Silence fell, the kind that wraps the whole room in thick cotton, choking the edges of speech. Claudine's eyes darted toward the door like she might bolt. But she didn't move. Just then, there was a knock. 3 short raps. I'd already called. During her shouting, I'd slipped my phone from my pocket and dialed. I didn't wait for her to land a hand before I decided to protect my daughter and myself. 2 officers stepped inside, slow but firm. One glanced at me, the other at her. Ma'am, the first one said, we've had a report of trespassing and assault. Claudine started to speak, then thought better of it. Her voice had dried up. They didn't handcuff her. She wasn't dragged, but they escorted her out, wet hair clinging to her face, shoes squelching with every step. I didn't follow. Etta came over, placing my phone on the counter without a word. I looked down at her. You okay? She nodded. She scared me, but I knew you had it. I almost broke then, but I didn't. Not yet. The door shut behind them. The rain kept falling. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Miles. She's gone, he said. They arrested her. No, I said calmly. She finally met herself. He didn't reply, but this time he didn't hang up either. I walked to the back porch and stood under the awning, watching the sky release everything it had held back for too long. The smell of wet earth rose around me. It didn't feel like a storm anymore. It felt like something ending and something beginning. The sun had just begun to spill over the ridgeline, brushing the hills with gold. I sat on the porch with a chipped mug of coffee in my hands, the same one I used when Etta was a baby, back when mornings felt like countdowns instead of invitations. Now they felt like grace. 6 months had passed since the night Claudine arrived unannounced. She hadn't spoken to me since. The legal process was crawling along, as they always do, but I wasn't angry anymore, just watchful, just awake. There was no slam of doors, no tightness in my chest, no walking on glass, afraid of who might raise their voice or rewrite history. Just birdsong, a light breeze, and the steady hum of peace settling into places that used to ache. I used to think justice came with noise, gavels slamming, verdicts announced, the dramatic unfolding of truth in front of a crowd. But real justice, I've learned, is quieter. It's the silence that comes when fear finally moves out. Etta was upstairs getting ready. Today was her first public art exhibit. She didn't talk about the piece ahead of time, just told me, "You'll know it when you see it." We arrived at the fair just after 10. It was held in the park across from City Hall. Rows of white tents and canvases fluttering slightly in the breeze, music drifting from a live jazz trio near the fountain. It smelled like funnel cake and turpentine, the kind of contrast that only makes sense at community events. Etta's booth was toward the end. A small crowd had gathered. I recognized a few neighbors, a couple of teachers from her school. They weren't just glancing, they were rooted, staring. Her piece was titled Inheritance. At first glance, it looked like a collage of black and white hands. 3 layers, one pair reaching upward, young, trembling. Another set in the center, holding gently, fingers steady. And the last, at the top, letting go, delicate but final. My throat tightened. Those were our hands. Mine, hers, and Claudine's. No names, no captions. But the meaning was unmistakable. One woman beside me whispered, "It's like generations of grief and strength all in one image." Another dabbed at her eyes. Etta stood nearby, pretending not to listen, arms crossed. But I saw the corner of her mouth lift when the older woman touched her shoulder and said, "You're going to change people." She already had. I didn't say much, just stepped up behind her and gently brushed her back with my fingers. No words, none needed. Later, as the fair thinned out and the sun softened, I felt someone watching me. Miles. He approached slowly. His eyes looked sunken, not from lack of sleep, but from too much truth. "I shouldn't be here," he said, hands in his pockets. I didn't answer right away, just let him speak. "She used me. For so long, I thought I was doing the right thing, standing by her, but I see it now." There was no apology, no tears, just exhaustion. "I don't expect anything," he added. "Then start being different," I said, voice even. "That's enough." He gave a slow nod. No embrace followed, no movie-ending reconciliation, just 2 siblings standing in the soft light of understanding. What was broken wouldn't be fixed, but it didn't have to stay sharp. By the time we got home that evening, the house glowed with late spring warmth. Etta went upstairs to sketch, her mind always moving faster than her pencil. I walked into the kitchen to make tea, passing the front door as I always did, then paused. The small red light on the security camera blinked. For months, that little light had filled me with dread. I installed it to catch my mother's deceit. It had witnessed every storm, but now it simply blinked. Quiet, steady, unthreatening. A reminder that protection isn't just about fear, it's also about peace. I smiled and walked on. These days, the law firm I rebuilt didn't look like the old one. I no longer took on clients with flashy cases or corporate leverage. I specialized in something smaller, more personal, family mediation, financial abuse, coercion. My first new client was a college student. Her parents had drained her savings behind her back, claiming they knew better. She sat across from me in my office, trembling. "You're not crazy," I told her, "and you're not alone." Her shoulders dropped, just an inch, but enough. That was the moment I knew. Everything I went through wasn't just survival, it was foundation. What had tried to break me had somehow taught me how to build. Etta came downstairs later that night and curled up next to me on the couch. She didn't say much, just leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was 5 and afraid of thunder. "It's quiet now," she murmured. "Yeah," I said, brushing her hair back gently. "This is what peace sounds like." She fell asleep there. I didn't move. Outside, the porch light flicked on with the timer. The wind carried the smell of wild sage through the screen door. I used to think peace was something you found. Turns out it's something you build, brick by broken brick.